Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring, 2001, The Two Towers, 2002, and The Return of the King, 2003, is widely regarded as a cinematic masterpiece. The films brought J.R.R. Tolkien's sprawling fantasy epic to life with breathtaking visuals, compelling performances, and a sweeping score. For millions of fans, these movies are the definitive adaptation of Middle-earth, shaping how they imagine its characters, landscapes, and stories. However, as beloved as the films are, they are not without their deviations from Tolkien's original texts. Some of these changes were necessary to adapt a dense, sprawling literary work into a cohesive cinematic narrative, while others were creative liberties that altered the spirit, themes, or details of the books. This story explores the biggest lies or, more accurately, the most significant deviations that the Lord of the Rings movies told audiences. These lies range from altered character arcs and omitted storylines to invented scenes and shifted themes. While some changes were minor and understandable, others fundamentally changed the narrative or misrepresented Tolkien's vision. Through an in-depth analysis, we'll uncover how these deviations impacted the story, why they were made, and what they mean for fans of both the books and the films. This is not a condemnation of Jackson's trilogy but a celebration of Tolkien's work and a critical look at how adaptation shapes perception. One of the most significant lies the Lord of the Rings movies told is the simplification of Frodo Baggins' journey as the ring-bearer. In Tolkien's books, Frodo is a complex, introspective character whose internal struggle with the One Ring's corrupting influence is depicted with nuance and depth. The films, however, streamline his arc, often portraying him as a more passive, vulnerable figure who is overwhelmed by the ring's power. In the Lord of the Rings novels, Frodo is a hobbit of remarkable resilience and moral strength. While the ring weighs heavily on him, he consistently demonstrates agency and courage. For example, in The Fellowship of the Ring book, Frodo voluntarily chooses to take the ring to Mordor at the Council of Elrond, saying, "I will take the ring, though I do not know the way." This moment is one of quiet determination, showcasing Frodo's willingness to shoulder an impossible burden despite his fear and uncertainty. Throughout the books, Frodo's journey is marked by moments of profound moral clarity. He spares Gollum's life multiple times, recognizing that pity and mercy are essential, even for a wretched creature corrupted by the ring. Frodo's interactions with other characters, such as Faramir, highlight his wisdom and compassion. In The Two Towers book, Frodo's encounter with Faramir is a testament to his strength. He resists the ring's temptation and earns Faramir's respect through his honesty and humility. Frodo's internal struggle is also more nuanced in the books. Tolkien describes the ring's psychological toll in vivid detail, showing how it erodes Frodo's sense of self while he fights to maintain his identity. By the time Frodo reaches Mount Doom, his failure to destroy the ring, claiming it for himself, is a tragic but understandable culmination of his ordeal. Yet, Tolkien emphasizes that Frodo's overall journey is heroic, as his mercy toward Gollum ultimately leads to the ring's destruction. In contrast, the films portray Frodo as a more passive and fragile character, often defined by his suffering rather than his resilience. Elijah Wood's performance captures Frodo's vulnerability and anguish, but the screenplay reduces his agency in key moments. For instance, at the Council of Elrond in The Fellowship of the Ring film, Frodo's decision to take the ring feels less like a bold choice and more like a reluctant acceptance, driven by the chaos and arguing among the other attendees. The film emphasizes his fear and hesitation, making him seem less resolute than his book counterpart. The films also amplify Frodo's physical and emotional fragility. Scenes of him collapsing, staring vacantly, or being overwhelmed by the ring's visions are frequent, creating an impression that he is constantly on the verge of breaking. While these moments convey the ring's power, they overshadow Frodo's moments of strength and moral clarity. For example, the films downplay Frodo's role in sparing Gollum, making it seem more like Sam's influence than Frodo's own compassion. One of the most significant deviations occurs in The Two Towers film, during Frodo's encounter with Faramir. In the books, Faramir is a noble and discerning man who immediately recognizes the ring's danger and refuses to take it, honoring Frodo's mission. In the film, however, Faramir initially succumbs to temptation, briefly deciding to take the ring to Gondor to prove his worth to his father, Denethor. This change not only alters Faramir's character, more on that later, but also undermines Frodo's agency. In the film, Frodo is dragged to Osgiliath against his will, caught in a conflict that feels extraneous to his journey. This invented subplot diminishes Frodo's role as a proactive hero and makes him a pawn in a larger drama. The simplification of Frodo's journey can be attributed to the demands of cinematic storytelling. Tolkien's introspective prose, which delves deeply into Frodo's thoughts, is difficult to translate to the screen without relying heavily on voiceovers or exposition. By emphasizing Frodo's suffering, the films create a more immediate, visual representation of the ring's corrupting influence, which is effective for audiences unfamiliar with the books. Additionally, the films needed to balance Frodo's story with the larger ensemble cast, which may have led to a reduction in his agency to make room for other characters' arcs. However, this change comes at a cost. The film's portrayal of Frodo as a passive victim risks undermining the moral and philosophical complexity of his journey. Tolkien's Frodo is a hero not because he is impervious to the ring's power but because he resists it through compassion, wisdom, and perseverance. By focusing on his suffering, the films tell a lie about Frodo's character, presenting him as weaker than he truly is. Another significant lie told by the Lord of the Rings movies is the alteration of Faramir's character. In Tolkien's books, Faramir, the younger son of Denethor and brother of Boromir, is a noble, wise, and compassionate figure who embodies the best qualities of Gondor's people. In the films, however, Faramir is depicted as a conflicted and initially misguided character, succumbing to the same temptation that led to Boromir's downfall. In the Two Towers book, Faramir is introduced as the captain of the Rangers of Ithilien, a group of Gondorian soldiers who operate in secret to protect their land from Sauron's forces. When he encounters Frodo and Sam, Faramir quickly deduces that Frodo carries a dangerous object, the One Ring. However, unlike his brother Boromir, who was tempted by the ring's power, Faramir immediately rejects any desire to claim it. He declares, "I would not take this thing, if it lay by the highway. Not were Minas Tirith falling in ruin and I alone could save her, so, using the weapon of the Dark Lord for her good and my glory." Faramir's refusal of the ring is a pivotal moment in the books, highlighting his moral strength and wisdom. He understands the ring's corrupting influence and chooses to honor Frodo's mission, even at great personal cost. Faramir's kindness extends to his treatment of Gollum, whom he questions gently, and his respect for Frodo and Sam, whom he aids with supplies and advice. His character serves as a counterpoint to Boromir, demonstrating that Gondor's nobility endures despite the pressures of war and despair. In the Two Towers film, Faramir's character undergoes a dramatic transformation. Rather than rejecting the ring outright, he decides to take Frodo, Sam, and the ring to Gondor, hoping to present it to his father, Denethor, as a means of earning his approval. This decision leads to an invented subplot in which Faramir's men escort Frodo and Sam to Osgiliath, where they are attacked by a Nazgul. Only after witnessing the ring's effect on Frodo and Sam's impassioned speech about hope, does Faramir relent and release them. This change fundamentally alters Faramir's character. In the films, he is portrayed as a man struggling with his father's expectations and his brother's legacy, making him more akin to Boromir than the distinct figure he is in the books. While this adds a layer of emotional complexity, it undermines Faramir's role as a symbol of Gondor's enduring virtue. The film's Faramir is not the wise and resolute leader of the books but a conflicted figure who must learn the same lesson Boromir did, albeit without the tragic consequences. The decision to alter Faramir's character likely stemmed from the filmmakers' desire to heighten dramatic tension and create a more cinematic arc. In the books, Faramir's immediate refusal of the ring is a quiet, introspective moment that works well in prose but may have felt anticlimactic on screen. By giving Faramir a moment of temptation, the films create a sense of danger and uncertainty, reinforcing the ring's allure and the stakes of Frodo's mission. The Osgiliath subplot also provides an action sequence, which aligns with the film's need to maintain a dynamic pace. However, this change misrepresents Faramir's role in Tolkien's story. By making him succumb to the ring's temptation, the films diminish his uniqueness and reduce him to a narrative device for escalating tension. This lie about Faramir's character not only alters his arc but also weakens the thematic contrast between him and Boromir, which is central to Tolkien's exploration of honor and sacrifice. One of the most noticeable lies of omission in the Lord of the Rings movies is the complete removal of Tom Bombadil, the Old Forest, and the Barrow-downs from the Fellowship of the Ring. These chapters in Tolkien's book are some of the most enigmatic and debated, but they play a significant role in establishing the tone, themes, and world-building of Middle-earth. In the Fellowship of the Ring book, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin encounter Tom Bombadil after leaving the Shire. Bombadil is a mysterious, jovial figure who lives in the Old Forest with his wife, Goldberry. He is described as master of the wood, water, and hill, with a deep connection to nature and an apparent immunity to the One Ring's power. When Frodo hands him the ring, Bombadil examines it curiously but is unaffected, even putting it on without disappearing. He rescues the hobbits from Old Man Willow, a malevolent tree, and later saves them from a Barrow-wight, a malevolent spirit in the Barrow-downs. The Bombadil chapters serve several purposes. First, they introduce the idea that Middle-earth is a vast, ancient world filled with beings and forces beyond the central conflict of the Ring. Bombadil's existence suggests that there are powers older and greater than Sauron, which adds depth to Tolkien's mythology. Second, these chapters emphasize the hobbits' vulnerability and inexperience, as they are repeatedly saved by Bombadil's intervention. Finally, the Barrow-downs sequence provides the hobbits with ancient blades, one of which Merry later uses to wound the Witch King, highlighting the interconnectedness of Tolkien's narrative. In the Fellowship of the Ring film, the entire Bombadil sequence is omitted. After leaving the Shire, the hobbits encounter a Nazgul and soon arrive at Bree, where they meet Strider. The Old Forest, Barrow-downs, and Bombadil are never mentioned, and the hobbits' journey feels more direct and action-oriented. This omission significantly alters the tone of the early story. In the book, the Bombadil chapters create a sense of wonder and mystery, blending folklore and fantasy in a way that grounds the hobbits' adventure in a larger, mythic world. The films, by contrast, prioritize urgency and danger, focusing on the Nazgul's pursuit and the Ring's immediate threat. While this makes for a tighter narrative, it sacrifices some of the richness and texture of Tolkien's world. The decision to cut Tom Bombadil and the related chapters was likely driven by practical considerations. Bombadil's enigmatic nature and lack of direct connection to the Ring's destruction make him a challenging character to include in a film adaptation. His whimsical demeanor and lengthy songs could have disrupted the pacing and tone of the Fellowship of the Ring, which needed to establish the stakes of the central conflict quickly. Additionally, the Barrow-downs sequence, while thematically important, is a detour that might have felt extraneous in a 3-hour film. While understandable, this omission is a lie by exclusion. By removing Bombadil and the Old Forest, the films present a more linear and less wondrous version of Middle-earth. Fans of the books miss the sense of a living, breathing world where ancient beings like Bombadil exist outside the main narrative, reminding us that the story of the Ring is just one chapter in a much larger history. Another significant lie told by the Lord of the Rings movies is the exaggeration of Aragorn's reluctance to embrace his destiny as the heir of Isildur and the future king of Gondor. In Tolkien's books, Aragorn is a confident and purposeful leader, while the films portray him as a brooding, self-doubting figure who must overcome his fear of failure. In the Lord of the Rings novels, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, is introduced as a seasoned ranger and the heir of Isildur, the ancient king who failed to destroy the One Ring. Aragorn is fully aware of his lineage and destiny, having been raised by Elrond in Rivendell and trained for leadership. While he operates as Strider, a rugged wanderer, this is a strategic choice to protect his identity and serve the free peoples of Middle-earth. Aragorn's journey in the books is not about overcoming self-doubt but about proving his worth through action and uniting the fractured peoples of Middle-earth. At the Council of Elrond, he openly declares his identity and pledges to protect Frodo. His leadership during the Fellowship's travels, his bravery at Helm's Deep, and his command of the army of the dead men of Dunharrow, all reflect his confidence and readiness to reclaim the throne. Aragorn's love for Arwen is a source of inspiration, not conflict, and he carries Anduril, the reforged sword of Isildur, as a symbol of his purpose from early in the story. In the films, Aragorn, played by Viggo Mortensen, is a more conflicted and modernized character. He is deeply reluctant to embrace his destiny, haunted by Isildur's failure and fearful that he, too, will succumb to weakness. This reluctance is emphasized in several scenes, such as when Elrond tells him, "Put aside the ranger. Become who you were born to be," or when Aragorn hesitates to wield Anduril, which is not reforged until the Return of the King film. The films also invent a subplot in which Aragorn doubts his worthiness due to his love for Arwen, whose immortality is tied to his success. This portrayal creates a more dramatic and relatable arc for Aragorn, as he evolves from a reluctant hero to a confident king. Moments like his rallying speech at the Black Gate or his coronation in The Return of the King feel earned because of his internal struggle. However, this arc comes at the expense of Tolkien's Aragorn, who is a mythic, almost Arthurian figure defined by his steadfast purpose. The film's decision to make Aragorn a reluctant hero reflects a desire to modernize the character for contemporary audiences. Tolkien's Aragorn, with his unyielding confidence and mythic gravitas, might have felt distant or unrelatable in a cinematic context. By giving him doubts and vulnerabilities, the films create a character arc that aligns with Hollywood's preference for flawed, evolving protagonists. The invented tension around Arwen's fate also adds emotional stakes, making Aragorn's journey more personal. However, this change misrepresents Aragorn's role in Tolkien's story. The book's Aragorn is not defined by self-doubt but by his ability to inspire and unite others. By exaggerating his reluctance, the films tell a lie about his character, transforming a mythic hero into a more conventional, modern protagonist. One of the most egregious lies told by the Lord of the Rings movies is the invented warg attack sequence in The Two Towers, which culminates in Aragorn's apparent death and miraculous survival. This subplot has no basis in Tolkien's books and serves primarily as a contrived way to add action and drama. In The Two Towers book, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli pursue the Uruk-hai who have captured Merry and Pippin. Their journey is arduous but straightforward, marked by their tracking skills and encounters with the riders of Rohan. There is no warg attack, and Aragorn is never separated from his companions or presumed dead. The focus is on their determination and the growing bond between the three, which lays the foundation for their roles in the Battle of Helm's Deep. In The Two Towers film, the journey is interrupted by a dramatic warg attack, in which a pack of wargs, wolf-like creatures, ambushes Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the Rohirrim. During the battle, Aragorn is dragged off a cliff by a warg and falls into a river, leading his companions to believe he is dead. The film milks this moment for emotional impact, showing Legolas and Gimli's grief and Theoden's pessimism. Aragorn is later revealed to be alive, waking up on a riverbank and riding back to Helm's Deep, guided by a vision of Arwen. This sequence is entirely invented and feels out of place in the context of Tolkien's story. The warg attack adds an action set-piece but disrupts the pacing of the narrative, delaying the build-up to Helm's Deep. Aragorn's death and return are a cheap plot device, designed to create artificial tension and give Aragorn a moment of personal reflection. The vision of Arwen, in particular, feels like an attempt to tie the sequence to Aragorn's romantic arc, but it adds little to the overall story. The warg attack and Aragorn's death were likely included to satisfy the demands of blockbuster filmmaking. The Two Towers needed to maintain a high level of action and suspense, and the pursuit of the Uruk-hai, while compelling in the books, is relatively subdued. By adding a dramatic battle and a cliffhanger moment, the filmmakers aimed to keep audiences engaged. The sequence also provides a visual showcase for the wargs and reinforces Aragorn's resilience, setting up his heroic return at Helm's Deep. However, this invented subplot is a lie that undermines the integrity of Tolkien's narrative. The books derive tension from the characters' relentless pursuit and the looming threat of Saruman's forces, not from contrived near-death experiences. By inserting this sequence, the films prioritize spectacle over substance, diluting the emotional and thematic weight of Aragorn's journey. Another lie told by the Lord of the Rings movies is the diminishment of Merry and Pippin's roles, particularly their growth into capable and heroic figures. In Tolkien's books, Merry and Pippin undergo significant character development, becoming key players in the war against Sauron. The films, while giving them memorable moments, often reduce them to comic relief or secondary characters. In the Lord of the Rings novels, Merry and Pippin start as mischievous hobbits but grow into courageous and resourceful figures. After their capture by the Uruk-hai in the Fellowship of the Ring book, They demonstrate ingenuity by escaping into Fangorn Forest and meeting Treebeard, the Ent. Their influence on the Ents is pivotal, as they inspire Treebeard to rally his people against Saruman, leading to the destruction of Isengard. Merry's arc continues in The Two Towers and The Return of the King books, where he pledges his service to Theoden, King of Rohan. He forms a deep bond with Theoden and becomes a valued advisor. During the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Merry plays a crucial role by stabbing the Witch King, weakening him enough for Eowyn to deliver the killing blow. This moment is the culmination of Merry's growth, as he overcomes his fear and proves his bravery. Pippin's arc is equally significant. After being separated from Merry, he travels to Minas Tirith with Gandalf and pledges his service to Denethor, Steward of Gondor. Pippin's loyalty and quick thinking save Faramir from Denethor's madness, as he alerts Gandalf to Denethor's plan to burn Faramir alive. Pippin also fights bravely in the Battle of the Blackgate, showing his growth from a carefree hobbit to a dedicated warrior. Both Merry and Pippin return to the Shire as changed hobbits, leading the resistance against Saruman's takeover in the Scouring of the Shire chapter. Their leadership and courage ensure the Shire's liberation, cementing their status as heroes. In the films, Merry and Pippin, played by Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd, are endearing and memorable but often relegated to comic relief or supporting roles. Their early scenes emphasize their mischief, such as stealing fireworks or bumbling into danger, which aligns with their book counterparts. However, the films give them fewer opportunities to demonstrate growth and agency. In The Two Towers film, Merry and Pippin's role in rallying the Ents is downplayed. While they still meet Treebeard and contribute to the attack on Isengard, their influence feels less deliberate, and the Ents' decision to march is driven more by Treebeard's realization of Saruman's destruction than by the Hobbit's persuasion. This reduces their agency and makes the Ents' victory feel less tied to their actions. Merry's role in The Return of the King film is closer to the books, as he joins Eowyn in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields and helps defeat the Witch King. However, his bond with Theoden is underdeveloped, and his contribution to the battle is overshadowed by Eowyn's heroics. Pippin's arc in Minas Tirith is similarly truncated. While he still saves Faramir from Denethor, his service to Gondor and his growth as a character are given less focus, with more emphasis on his emotional reactions than his actions. The most significant omission is the Scouring of the Shire, which the films entirely cut. In the books, this chapter is a critical part of Merry and Pippin's arcs, as they apply the skills and courage they've gained to protect their home. By omitting this sequence, the films deny Merry and Pippin their final moment of heroism, leaving their arcs incomplete. The diminishment of Merry and Pippin's roles reflects the film's need to streamline the narrative and focus on the central conflict of the ring. With a large ensemble cast, the filmmakers likely prioritized characters like Frodo, Aragorn, and Gandalf, leaving less screen time for Merry and Pippin's development. The decision to cut the Scouring of the Shire was also driven by pacing concerns, as the films already had a lengthy climax in The Return of the King. However, these changes tell a lie about Merry and Pippin's importance. In the books, they are not just sidekicks but integral figures whose actions shape the war's outcome. By reducing them to comic relief or secondary players, the films undermine their growth and the theme of ordinary individuals rising to greatness, which is central to Tolkien's story. The Lord of the Rings movies also tell a significant lie about Denethor, the Steward of Gondor. In Tolkien's books, Denethor is a complex and tragic figure, a capable leader undone by despair and the influence of Sauron's Palantir. The films, however, portray him as a one-dimensional villain, a mad and incompetent ruler who contributes little to Gondor's defense. In The Return of the King book, Denethor is introduced as the Steward of Gondor, a proud and intelligent man who has ruled in the absence of a king. He is deeply committed to Gondor's survival, coordinating its defenses against Sauron's forces with skill and determination. However, Denethor's use of a Palantir, a seeing stone that allows him to spy on Sauron, exposes him to the Dark Lord's manipulations. Sauron feeds Denethor distorted visions of Gondor's impending doom, sowing despair and eroding his sanity. Denethor's tragedy is his inability to overcome this despair. He becomes convinced that Gondor's defeat is inevitable and that the return of a king, Aragorn, would diminish his family's legacy. His grief over the death of Boromir, his favored son, and his strained relationship with Faramir further deepen his despair. Denethor's downfall culminates in his attempt to burn himself and Faramir alive, believing death is preferable to defeat. However, even in his madness, Denethor is a nuanced character, a once great leader broken by psychological manipulation and personal loss. In The Return of the King film, Denethor, played by John Noble, is portrayed as a cartoonish villain. From his first appearance, he is depicted as unhinged, dismissive of Gandalf, and openly cruel to Faramir. His incompetence is exaggerated, with scenes of him eating messily while sending Faramir on a doomed mission to retake Osgiliath. The film omits any mention of the Palantir, leaving Denethor's madness unexplained and making him seem inherently irrational. Denethor's death is also altered. In the book, he sets himself alight on a pyre in a moment of tragic despair. In the film, he is set on fire by Gandalf's intervention and runs screaming from the citadel, falling to his death. This change turns a poignant moment into a spectacle, further reducing Denethor to a caricature. The film's portrayal of Denethor likely stems from the need to simplify the narrative and create a clear antagonist in Minas Tirith. The book's Denethor requires context, his use of the Palantir, his history as a leader, his complex motivations that would have been difficult to convey in a limited runtime. By making him a straightforward villain, the films streamline the story and heighten the stakes of Gandalf's and Pippin's efforts to save Gondor. However, this change misrepresents Denethor's character and diminishes the tragedy of his arc. The book's Denethor is a cautionary tale about the dangers of despair and the corrupting influence of power, even for a good man. By portraying him as a mad tyrant, the films tell a lie that strips away his complexity and reduces him to a plot device. Perhaps the most significant lie of omission in the Lord of the Rings movies is the exclusion of the Scouring of the Shire chapter from The Return of the King. This chapter is a critical part of Tolkien's narrative, providing closure for the Hobbit's arcs and reinforcing the story's themes. Its absence in the films fundamentally alters the story's resolution. In The Return of the King book, the Scouring of the Shire occurs after Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin return to the Shire following the destruction of the ring. They discover that their home has been transformed into an industrialized dystopia, ruled by Sharky, revealed to be Saruman, and his men. The Shire's hobbits have been oppressed, their lands despoiled, and their freedoms curtailed. The four hobbits, now seasoned by their adventures, take charge. Merry and Pippin, drawing on their military experience, organize a rebellion, while Frodo and Sam provide moral leadership. The hobbits defeat Saruman's forces in the Battle of Bywater, liberate the Shire, and begin the process of restoration. Frodo's mercy toward Saruman, even after his betrayal, underscores the theme of pity, though Saruman is ultimately killed by Wormtongue. The Scouring of the Shire serves several purposes. It shows the hobbits' growth, as they apply the skills and courage they've gained to protect their home. It illustrates the far-reaching consequences of evil, as even the idyllic Shire is not immune to corruption. Finally, it provides a bittersweet resolution, as Frodo struggles to find peace in the Shire and eventually departs for the Undying Lands. In The Return of the King film, the Shire is untouched by conflict when the hobbits return. The film depicts their homecoming as a joyful reunion, with scenes of Sam's wedding and the hobbits laughing in the Green Dragon. While this creates a more uplifting ending, it omits the Scouring of the Shire and its thematic weight. The absence of this chapter means that Merry and Pippin's arcs are incomplete, as they never get to demonstrate their leadership in the Shire. It also weakens the story's exploration of the cost of war, as the Shire remains a pristine haven rather than a place scarred by conflict. Frodo's departure for the Undying Lands feels less motivated without the context of his inability to heal from the Shire's trauma. The decision to cut the Scouring of the Shire was likely driven by pacing and tone. The Return of the King film already has a lengthy climax, with multiple endings: the destruction of the ring, Aragorn's coronation, the Hobbit's return. Adding another major sequence would have extended the runtime and risked alienating audiences expecting a traditional happy ending. The filmmakers may also have felt that the Scouring would detract from the triumph of Sauron's defeat, as it introduces a new conflict after the main villain's fall. However, this omission is a lie that alters the heart of Tolkien's story. The Scouring of the Shire is not a mere epilogue but a culmination of the Hobbit's journey and a reflection on the enduring impact of evil. By presenting the Shire as untouched, the films offer a simpler, less challenging resolution that undermines the complexity of Tolkien's themes. In the films, Aragorn and Arwen's romance, portrayed by Viggo Mortensen and Liv Tyler, is a prominent subplot, particularly in The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers. The films invent several dramatic elements, such as Arwen's role in rescuing Frodo from the Nazgul, replacing Glorfindel from the book, and a vision of her future with Aragorn, which motivates her to stay in Middle-earth. The most significant invention is the subplot in The Two Towers and The Return of the King films, where Arwen's life is tied to the fate of the ring, and she begins to weaken as Sauron's power grows. This invented drama creates tension, suggesting that Arwen's survival depends on Aragorn's success. Scenes of her lying pale and frail in Rivendell, combined with Elrond's warnings, add emotional stakes to Aragorn's journey. The films also introduce a love triangle with Eowyn, implying that Aragorn is torn between her and Arwen, though this is resolved in The Return of the King. The amplification of Aragorn and Arwen's romance reflects the film's need to appeal to a broad audience and add emotional depth to Aragorn's arc. Tolkien's subtle, mythic love story might have felt too distant for modern viewers, so the filmmakers created a more conventional romantic narrative with conflict and resolution. Arwen's expanded role also gives her more screen time, addressing the lack of prominent female characters in the books. However, this change misrepresents the nature of Aragorn and Arwen's relationship. In the books, their love is a steadfast, almost spiritual bond, not a source of doubt or drama. By adding invented conflicts and tying Arwen's fate to the ring, the films tell a lie that shifts the story's focus and dilutes the mythic quality of their romance. Underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 10. The Simplification of the Ents decision. The Lord of the Rings movies also tell a lie by simplifying the Ents' decision to march against Saruman in The Two Towers. In Tolkien's books, the Ents' decision is a deliberate and collective process, driven by their sense of duty and Merry and Pippin's influence. The films, however, portray it as a sudden, emotionally driven choice, reducing the Ents' agency and the Hobbit's role. The book's Ents, a deliberate council. In The Two Towers book, the Ents, led by Treebeard, hold an Entmoot, a council of Ents, to discuss whether to take action against Saruman. Merry and Pippin's presence and their accounts of Saruman's destruction of the forests play a significant role in swaying the Ents. The Entmoot is a slow, deliberative process, reflecting the Ents' cautious and ancient nature. After days of discussion, the Ents decide to march on Isengard, driven by a sense of responsibility to protect their forests and oppose Saruman's evil. This sequence highlights the Ents' wisdom and autonomy, as well as Merry and Pippin's growth as influential figures. The attack on Isengard is a triumphant moment, showcasing the Ents' power and their role in turning the tide of the war. The film's Ents, a sudden reversal. In The Two Towers film, the Ents' decision is dramatically altered. Treebeard initially refuses to involve the Ents in the war, telling Merry and Pippin that it is not their fight. The Entmoot, depicted briefly, results in a decision to remain neutral. Only after Treebeard sees the devastation of Fangorn Forest, caused by Saruman's orcs, does he change his mind, letting out a roar that summons the Ents to attack Isengard. This change makes the Ents' decision feel impulsive and emotionally driven, rather than the result of careful deliberation. It also diminishes Merry and Pippin's role, as their influence is less explicit. The film's portrayal prioritizes visual spectacle, with the Ents' attack on Isengard serving as a climactic action sequence. Why the change? The simplification of the Ents' decision was likely driven by the need to streamline the narrative and create a more cinematic moment. The book's lengthy Entmoot might have slowed the pacing, and the filmmakers may have felt that a sudden, visceral reaction from Treebeard would be more engaging for audiences. The focus on the forest's destruction also provides a clear motivation, making the Ents' actions more relatable. However, This change tells a lie about the Ents' character and the Hobbit's impact. In the books, the Ents are thoughtful and autonomous, and their decision reflects their deep connection to Middle-earth's fate. By portraying them as reactive, the films undermine their wisdom and reduce Merry and Pippin's agency, altering a key moment in the story. Underscore 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 underscore. Conclusion. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy is a monumental achievement in filmmaking, bringing Tolkien's Middle-earth to life with unparalleled scope and passion. However, in adapting the books, the films told several significant lies, deviations that altered characters, omitted key storylines, and shifted themes. From the simplification of Frodo's journey and the betrayal of Faramir's character to the omission of Tom Bombadil and the scouring of the Shire, these changes reflect the challenges of translating a dense literary work into a cinematic narrative. Some of these lies were necessary to meet the demands of filmmaking, such as streamlining the plot or appealing to a broad audience. Others, however, were creative choices that prioritized drama, spectacle, or modern sensibilities over fidelity to Tolkien's vision. While these changes do not diminish the film's quality, they do alter the story's depth, complexity, and philosophical underpinnings. For fans of the books, these lies can be a source of frustration, as they obscure the richness of Tolkien's world and characters. For fans of the films, they may be invisible, as the trilogy stands on its own as a cohesive and powerful story. Ultimately, the Lord of the Rings movies and books are two different beasts, each with its own strengths and flaws. By understanding the lies the films told, we can appreciate both versions of the story while celebrating the enduring legacy of Tolkien's masterpiece.